What makes someone the most feared prisoner in the United Kingdom? Is it their crimes, their unpredictability, or is it their reputation for pure chaos? In the case of Charles Bronson, it's all of the above. A man who has spent more than 40 years behind bars, mostly in solitary confinement, Bronson's story is as bizarre as it is terrifying. From armed robbery to hostage-taking, to becoming a pop culture icon, his life defies belief. But who really is Charles Bronson? Is he a misunderstood man or a monster of his own making? Let's dive into the fascinating and deeply unsettling life of Britain's most infamous prisoner. Charles Bronson wasn't always Charles Bronson. Born Michael Gordon Peterson on December 6, 1952, in Luton, England, his early life was relatively unremarkable. His family described him as a normal, cheerful boy. But as he grew older, his temper and tendency for violence began to show. By the time he was a teenager, he had been involved in multiple street fights, which eventually led to his first run-ins with the law. After leaving school, Peterson worked various jobs, including as a circus strongman, a job that showcased his incredible physical strength. But the quiet life wasn't for him. He soon fell into a life of crime, and in 1974, at the age of 22, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for armed robbery. Little did anyone know that sentence would mark the beginning of a life mostly spent behind bars. So, where does the name Charles Bronson come from? In the 1980s, while in prison, Peterson decided to adopt the name of the American actor Charles Bronson, known for his roles in gritty, action-packed films. The name seemed to fit perfectly with Peterson's tough guy persona. By then, he had already begun building a reputation as one of Britain's most violent inmates. But the name change wasn't just about image. It marked a turning point. Bronson started to see himself as more than just a prisoner. He became a brand, a myth, and a symbol of rebellion. This transformation set the stage for the chaos that would define the rest of his life. Bronson's time in prison has been defined by extreme violence. His initial sentence of 7 years could have ended in the early 1980s, but his behavior ensured he remained locked up. Over the decades, Bronson has been involved in numerous assaults on prison staff and fellow inmates. These incidents include: Bronson is infamous for climbing onto prison roofs and staging protests. In one instance, he caused over £250,000 in damage by tearing apart the roof of Broadmoor Hospital. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of Bronson's criminal history is his tendency to take hostages. He's held prison staff, fellow inmates, and even his own solicitor at knife point during his time behind bars. In one infamous case, he held a librarian hostage and demanded a helicopter, a cup of tea, and an inflatable doll. Bronson's attacks were often unprovoked and incredibly violent. In one case, he attacked a fellow inmate with a glass jug. In another, he bit a prison officer's ear off. Bronson has spent the majority of his prison life in solitary confinement. Why? Because he's considered too dangerous to mix with other prisoners. Solitary confinement is known to have severe psychological effects, but Bronson seems to thrive in it. He's described his time in isolation as both a curse and a blessing, claiming it's given him the space to think and create. But what does a man do with decades alone in a cell? Bronson's answer was simple. He reinvented himself. He took up art, began writing books, and developed a workout routine that turned him into a physical powerhouse. His book Solitary Fitness became a bestseller, offering readers a glimpse into the mind of a man who spent more time alone than most people can imagine. One of the most surprising aspects of Bronson's life is his art. While in prison, he began creating surreal and often disturbing pieces that reflect his inner turmoil. His artwork has been displayed in galleries and even sold for significant sums. Some of his most famous works critique the prison system, while others explore themes of violence and madness. Is Bronson's art a genuine expression of his soul, or is it just another way to feed his legend? Either way, it's undeniably fascinating. His artistic talent has led some to argue that Bronson is more than just a violent criminal. He's a complex, deeply troubled man with something to say. Over the years, Bronson has been diagnosed with various mental health disorders, including antisocial personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. Some argue that his violent behavior is a symptom of these conditions and that the prison system has failed to address his needs. Others believe Bronson uses his mental health diagnoses as an excuse for his actions. One of the most controversial aspects of Bronson's story is the question of whether he's truly dangerous or just misunderstood. Some former prison staff have described him as polite, articulate, and even charming. Others say he's a ticking time bomb who thrives on chaos. So, who is the real Charles Bronson? The answer might depend on who you ask. In 2008, Bronson's life was turned into a feature film starring Tom Hardy. Bronson is a surreal, violent, and darkly comedic portrayal of his life, blending fact and fiction to create a larger-than-life version of the man himself. Hardy's performance was widely praised, and the film introduced Bronson's story to a global audience. But how accurate is the film? While it captures the chaos and violence of Bronson's life, it's also heavily stylized, often blurring the line between reality and myth. For Bronson, this might be exactly what he wanted, to be remembered not just as a man, but as a legend. Bronson is believed to hold the record for the longest time spent in solitary confinement in the UK. Over the years, Bronson has gained a cult following, including celebrities who admire his art and story. Some psychologists believe Bronson's behavior is a response to the prison environment itself, arguing that he's a product of the system rather than a true psychopath. Despite his violent reputation, Bronson has shown moments of vulnerability. He's expressed love for his family and a deep connection to his late mother, who he described as his rock. Charles Bronson's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Is he truly Britain's most dangerous man, or is he a victim of a broken system? Does his art and creativity redeem him, or are they just distractions from his violent past? And perhaps most intriguingly, how much of his legend is real, and how much is a carefully constructed persona. Bronson himself has said, "I'm a nice guy, but sometimes I lose all my senses and become nasty. That doesn't make me evil, just confused." Charles Bronson's story is not one that can be easily categorized or understood. On one hand, he's a man whose violent actions have terrorized those around him and made him a symbol of chaos within the prison system. On the other hand, he's an individual who has managed to find creativity and purpose in an environment designed to strip away humanity. His legacy is a paradox. A man who is both feared and celebrated, a symbol of destruction and a vessel of unexpected artistry. But what does his life say about the prison system itself? For decades, Bronson's behavior has exposed the flaws in how institutions handle individuals with extreme personalities and violent tendencies. Is he a product of the environment he's been kept in, or was he always destined to follow this path? These are questions that linger as Bronson's story refuses to be neatly resolved. Bronson's ability to transform his isolation into a platform for his art and fitness is remarkable, but it does not erase the pain and fear he has caused. His story serves as a cautionary tale about unchecked violence, the human capacity for resilience, and the complexity of the human mind. Whether you view Charles Bronson as a monster or a misunderstood figure, there is no denying his impact. He challenges our perceptions of justice, rehabilitation, and even humanity itself. As long as his story is told, the legend of Charles Bronson will continue to provoke, inspire, and unsettle. What do you think? Is Charles Bronson a victim of the system, or a man who created his own chaos? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mystery Junky for more deep dives into the world's most intriguing stories.